1973, there were no women officers in the Army. Women's Army Corps was completely separate, and then they integrated, if you will, the enlisted force, but there were no women officers. And in 1973, the Army decided to do a pilot program to allow women into the ROTC program. So in 1974, they opened the ROTC program to women. So I joined the ROTC program in 1974, graduated and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1978. And I had a reserve commission, which meant that my obligation was to go to the Engineer Officer Basic Course, which at the time was at Fort Belvoir, and do the 4-month Engineer Basic Course, and then join a reserve unit. Now, in 1978, the job market was not super wonderful, and so on a personal basis, I had to find a real job, and then, have a reserve commitment, in addition to that. The school administration walked in and basically said, we've got a pilot program. We're going to put 25 lieutenants in the Civil Works districts on 2-year tours. So I stuck my hand up and I said, I'm interested, and they sent me to Fort Worth. So here I am. I'm a butter bar, and I walk in, reported to the deputy commander, who was a light colonel named Chuck Lively. I just said, sir, I'd like to do environmental work. And he said, you want to do planning or operations? Well, I didn't know anything about either one of them. So I said, well, planning, I guess. So he picked up the phone and called the chief of environmental resources, this guy named Bud Horseman. So Bud came over, and Bud didn't know what to do with a lieutenant either. But I ended up doing environmental work, and I spent 2 years in the environmental resources branch doing exactly what I wanted to do, which was working on environmental analysis and environmental impact statements for planning projects. And when my 2 years was up, the three GS-12s in the environmental office went to Bud and they said, Becky's going to get out of the Army in a few months and we want to keep her. I went down to Fort Hood, I out-processed out of the Army, and I came back the next week as a GS-9. I had a bachelor's degree in economics, but I had a minor in biology, and that allowed me to qualify in CP18 as either a biologist or an economist. And I switched back and forth between those series more than once during my career. So I started out in environmental resources as a biologist, and I stayed in environmental resources until sometime in the 90s. And then a GS-13 chief of economics branch opened. So I got a promotion to GS-13, and I was chief of, it was economics branch when we'd gone into cost sharing. That happened in 1986, and that changed a lot of things. The military was having a lot of construction work in the 90s. There was a need for military type planning, and we started doing some of that. So there were lots of big structural changes happening, and that manifested itself in my branch in that we diversified quite a bit, and we picked up a military master planning program. We picked up the CAD GIS function, at least for planning, and several other things. And I had all of it sort of became the miscellaneous group. And I had that job until 2001. At some point, at least some of the districts had eliminated their planning divisions because they didn't have any program, and that created some downstream effects that were fairly problematic. And I can't remember who the division engineer was at the time, but he basically planted his finger in the chest of all his DEs and said, you are going to reestablish planning groups, planning organizations, and at least in Fort Worth, you're going to make it a GS-14 job, because that's what I think it needs to make sure that we've got stuff, coming into the pipeline. And so I competed for that job as the newly reestablished planning chief. I was project manager on a major environmental and planning project. Well, I guess we still call it Central City. And also during that time, I deployed to New Orleans after Katrina for a couple of times. It was always felt, it was like common knowledge in the workforce, that Fort Worth was a big, important district within the Corps. So the quality of the active duty officers who were sent here to be district engineers was always good. As a matter of fact, Fort Worth was understood to be one of those districts that you were sent to if you were on the fast track to become a general. So when you have leadership like that, the workforce kind of comes to depend on that. that we know when push comes to shove, our leaders are going to do the right thing, but it also sets a standard for how you behave. And I think that would sum up my experience here. That no, there are some exceptions, but in general, I was always proud to work here. As I look back, I mean, 1979 was a long time ago, and things have changed dramatically, but public service is still public service. And it's, I'm sure, very hard to be a public servant right now. But it's kind of always been hard to be a public servant. But make no mistake, that's what, I'm going to tear up. It is public service. That's what we do.